maybe about 60,000 people might be watching this, many of whom are youth leaders, right in the nitty-gritty work of working with adolescents. If there was one piece of advice that you could give them, what would that be?
So I think one thing that we want everyone to know who is working with youth, parents, youth ministers, volunteers, is that you're already teaching about sexuality. You're doing it every day. It might be related to the policies you have, the way you even yourself are in relationship or present yourself, but we're teaching about it already. We just need to take a pause and think about how to do that more intentionally and how to ask ourselves how our theology fits with what we're already teaching about sexuality.
I think really when you are taking that pause and thinking, what do we want to be conveying to young people, we really want to switch the starting point. So for youth ministers to not start with the behaviors we don't want young people to exhibit. So instead of the just say no message, it's the critical thinking about what do we want you to say yes to, what do we want you to say no to, and why, and how to help young people really make decisions that are values-based and are aligned to their faith formation is different than starting with the behaviors we don't want them to exhibit. So building in opportunities to be holistic and make it more than about just say no to sexual intercourse until marriage, and instead about how are you, as you're finding your way through adolescence, thinking about sensuality, thinking about intimacy, thinking about relationship, thinking about connection, and that when we are really intentional about the messages that we provide, the impact on young people will be much more positive than when we start from a place of just say no. We're likely to create power struggles, and we're likely to create opportunities for them to push back and say, everyone's telling me to say no all the time to everything that seems fun, and I don't want that, and so I might feel like I want to leave the church, I want to leave faith, I want to leave all of that behind so I can go and do what I want to do, and I don't think that's the impact we want to have on young people. And so we really need to switch our messaging if we want to change the impact that we're having.
And that so much sets up and aligns actually with a secular view that sexual intercourse or something about sexual behaviors is the thing we have to spend all of our waking hours thinking about. And that doesn't even align with what we theologically think, right? We want you to be thinking about God most of that time, or your relationship with God as it's lived out with other people in your life. That's the key to sexuality. So starting with the no, starting with the don't do, actually is not helping kids embody a positive, holistic, joy-filled sexuality. Starting with God created our bodies, and we are co-creators in that. That I'd love to spend more time talking about the love commandment rather than no, right? How do we love people well? How do you love yourself? How do you love your neighbor? How do you do that as a 14-year-old when you don't know how your body's changing? You're worried about what other people think about you. How do you balance in those relationships? What happens when your friends become way more important than your parents and you don't talk to them anymore? That love commandment is out of balance. We need to know how to balance that throughout our entire lives. There's so much more to our theological tradition that relates to sexuality than just say no or marriage, that we're not equipping our adolescents with what some of our most core faith values and stories are. And if we step back, we could think about how much more time do we want to spend on those kinds of messages and stories so that our kids can live out healthy, joy-filled, embodied, relational sexuality.